Hello friends, good morning. Welcome to Mission Possible by BK. This is Bharat, a chartered accountant by profession, and we are covering JAIB PPB module, and we have already covered two units in this. So this is the third unit, and this pertains to retail banking, wholesale and international banking. Apart from this, we will also learn more about depository receipts and also participatory notes. So the first topic here is about retail banking. Retail banking is very simple to understand. That means all the retailers, the services which are offered by the bank to retailers as is commonly known as retail banking. There are something called as corporates and there are something called as retailers. That means individual customers. So retail banking is known as consumer banking, and it is nothing but banking services to individuals rather than your institutions or business corporations or financial institutions. So that is all about your retail banking. So today retail banking is characterized by mainly three features: multiple products. We have credit cards, we have debit cards, we have investment schemes, we have insurances, and multiple channels of distribution. That means we have call centers, internet banking, and ATM kiosks. And other than that, multiple customer groups, which are majorly consumers and small business owners. That means those who are having a small shop kind of thing, they are generally classified as retail banking. Your corporate banking is something which is very huge in size, whereas retail banking is something which is very smaller in size compared to your corporate banking. So the commonly offered retail products are savings bank account, current deposits, recurring deposits, term deposit account, zero balance, senior citizen deposits, basic saving bank deposits account. This is a scheme which has been offered with some features like zero balance and also good interest rates. So most of the banks are offering this kind of a schemes nowadays. So these are all the retail deposit products which are available to individual consumers. And apart from the deposit products, we also have something called as loan products. Loan products is something which you all must be very much aware of. Home loans for existing construction or for your interior decoration or for your refurbishment of your house. Home loans to non-resident Indians, auto loans for purchase of new used four vehicles or two wheelers. And other than that, you also have personal loans for various purposes, for your domestic needs as well as for marriage or something, and educational loans, trade related advances for small people, especially for setting up a business like MSME or smaller sector which generally have only one people or sole proprietor concern. They can take loans for starting a business, for a small shop kind of thing. Crop loans is available, credit cards is available. These are all the retail products which are available to the consumers. And apart from this, the retail services: safe deposit locker, you all must be knowing, locker facility where you can store your valuable items, depository services, bank assurance products. So the drivers of retail banking in India, so not so important, but just to have an overview, I have listed it out. The purchasing power of people in India has been increasing, and the average growth rate is almost 7% each year. So that's the reason the retail banking has been growing rapidly from 1992 to till now, almost 30 years. The retail banking sector has grown rapidly because in the earlier days, people, in order to get loans, it was not so easy. Even if you are salaried, getting a loan was very difficult task. But nowadays, even if you are employed with a minimum salary of 10,000, we can get a loan. So this just tells us that how much the retail banking has rapidly evolved over a period of time. Apart from this, there are also changes in the demographic profile. Demographic analysis is nothing but study of the population based on various factors such as age or race or something like that. So that's called basically demographics. So even the demographic profile of India has changed when compared to 1992 till now. So that's the reason they are saying that the average age of borrower has dropped from 40 years almost 5 years ago to an estimated 30 years. That means earlier people around 40 years used to borrow loan, but nowadays it has been reduced by 30 years. If you take the as on date data, it is even reduced to 20 years because people get educational loans quite before they start earning. So at the age of 17 itself, people get a loan. So the average age of borrower has now reduced drastically when compared to your earlier years. And also decline in average house costs. So the average house cost to annual income ratio by 4-5 times, from a higher of 11 to 14 times a decade ago. Almost 10 years ago, the average house cost to annual income ratio has been declined rapidly. This also led to an affordable EMI. People are now preferring to have an own house by paying the EMI rather than paying the house rent. So the psychology of people also has changed over the years. And also aggressive lending by banks. People nowadays have a lot of targets, especially both public and private sector banks. They have a target to give a lot of loans to people, and at the same time they need to have a target with regards to deposits. So all these target systems have led the banks in order to do aggressive banking and also aggressive lending. eventually. Tax breaks also, there are a lot of tax benefits available to the people who borrow loan. For example, if we take educational loan, we get deductions in our income tax. Similarly, if you take house loan, we get deductions in income tax. So there are a lot of tax perks which are available in terms of taking a loan, and that's the reason which has also boosted up the banks to give more loans, and people are interested to take loans because one is that they can get the benefit of the loan, second is that they also have the income tax benefit. Other growth drivers, there are a lot of other factors, like the rapidly changing schemes which are offered by the bank. Earlier there was no mobile banking or internet banking, people used to follow the passbook system, but nowadays technology has changed. We rarely visit banks, it is only until and unless we need some cash withdrawal or cash deposit we go to the banks. Other than that, nowadays ATM kiosk itself has deposit machines, and also everything is done, transactions are everything done through internet banking. Even we can take a DD from the online and we can just visit the bank and take the DDs. So the system has changed rapidly, and all these factors have rapidly led to the increase of banking sector in India. This chapter is mainly to explain the different types of banking, not fully relevant from your exam point of view, but you just need to have an overall view. Next, coming to the wholesale and international banking. Wholesale banking refers to the comprehensive financial services which are offered by merchant banks to large corporations or government agents. So wholesale banking, they have a lot of products, especially multinational corporations are typically wholesale banking clients. For example, if you take banks like HSBC or Citibank or JP Morgan, they offer a wide range of banking services to MNCs because these are universal banks. That means they are situated in all the parts of the world. They can offer all the facilities to all the major MNC customers whom they are having. So some of the wholesale banking products for your reference as mentioned here. We will learn more about this at a later stage, but as of now you can just remember the names. Fund-based services. There are two types of services. One is fund-based, another is non-fund based. Fund-based services involve some cash element in it, whereas non-fund based services doesn't involve any cash element in it. For example, a bank gives a guarantee. So here there is no outflow of cash from the banker's perspective. So it is a non-fund based, whereas a term lending or term loan, here cash outflow is involved and funds outflow is involved. Hence it is called as fund based services. The most common fund based services is your term lending, that means lending for a shorter period or longer period. Short term finances, working capital finances, which is nothing but your bank overdraft or your cash credit, which frequently you offer to companies. And other than that, you have bills discounting, structured finance, export credit. Structured finance is like a modern way of coining a loan. It involves a lot of elements into it. So structured finance we will learn later, but as of now structured finance is only available to huge multinational corporations. Normally normal companies do not get this benefit of structured finance because it involves a lot of elements into it. So sometimes what happens is they give a loan and then they restructure the loan and they offer some benefits like securitization. So a lot of elements involved together is called as structured finance. It is not just one product, it is a mix of various products which are offered to huge MNCs who can bear that kind of a finance scheme. So that is what is called as structured finance. And apart from that, you have non-fund based services. Just now I told you it doesn't involve any outflow of funds, bank guarantee or letter of credit or collection of bills and documents. These are all non-fund services which the bankers generally provide, and it's also of wide importance. Other than that, you have a lot of value added services. You can just go through it. It's like free salary account, corporate salary accounts, national electronic fund transfer. They do bulk transfer, bulk RTGS system, bulk clearing services, all these kind of forex help, exchange of currency. These are called as value added services which the banks offer to large corporations. Apart from this, you have internet banking services, which is the most common, like payment of funds and also your payment, corporate internet banking, plus your supply chain management and supply chain partners. Supply chain is nothing but when you purchase something you need to make a payment. So all this happens through internet based services. Even opening an LC also happens through an internet mode these days. A lot of banks have started this online mode of opening an LC. All the discrepancies in LC are sorted out in an online mode. So these are nothing but internet banking services. Especially with COVID, everything has become online now, and these kind of services provide a lot of benefit to the MNCs. So next, coming to the topic of international banking. International banking, is something that provides financial services to international clients, such as payment account or loan opportunities. A lot of people, MNC companies are situated here in India. So these kind of banks actually provide a lot of facilities to those companies. For example, Google is an American company and it is functioning in London. It is in need of funds to meet its working capital. In such scenario, Google can actually avail the banking services in the form of loan or overdraft or any other facility through bank in London. Just because it is an American company, it need not approach a American bank. It can approach any bank in London and it can get the benefit of the banking services. So this is called as international banking. International banking is majorly, most useful for MNC corporations. That's why most of the MNC corporation, if you see, apart from having an account in public sector bank, they also have an account in private sector banks like Standard Chartered Bank or Citibank or HSBC, because these are all international banks. So that means their presence is situated all over the world. So what happens in this case, if at all they want to open an LC or they want to have an import bills of document collection, then these kind of banks can offer much better services compared to your local banks, because these banks have presence everywhere in each and every country and each and every state. These banks have an office, so it becomes easy for the MNCs to operate the banking operations in terms of LC or collection of documents when they have accounts in these MNC banks or universal banks, which is commonly called as. And the common need of exporters in international banking, packing credit, all these are nothing but your LC related services. Whenever you sell something, and in international transactions, almost the payment is either based on LC or it is based on advance payment. So if it is based on LC, it is again divided into two types. One is Sight LC, that means immediate payment. Another is Usance LC. Usance LC means it will have a credit limit of 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. In this case of Usance LC, what we will do, whenever we get this LC, we will go to the bank and we will discount it and take the money upfront. So these kind of benefits also are provided by the international banks, and especially in order to avail these facilities, mostly the MNC banks have their ruling. They are much more robust in their system for this international banking services when compared to your local banks. So these are the commonly used international banking facilities, like your packing credit, bill negotiation, bill purchases, bank guarantees. All these are your topics which come under your letter of credit. There is a separate video in accounts module which I have made on letters of credit and bills of exchange. You can please watch that video. In that video I have detailedly explained how these bills of exchange and letter of credit works. So you can just watch that video for much better understanding. And next, coming to your importers, same like importers, when you are purchasing goods from another country, you again need to give an LC or documents for collection. All these facilities are generally useful when it comes to MNCs banks or universal banks. Other than this, they also offer some other facilities like EEFC, exchange earners foreign currency. So all the Indian companies can maintain a foreign currency account, not just INR. We can also maintain a foreign currency account. The most commonly maintained foreign currency account is USD and Euro. So companies generally maintain the EEFC account so that they can avoid this exchange fluctuation. That means sometimes if the rate of USD to INR today is 73, tomorrow it becomes 74. If I have to pay money, then I have to pay 1 rupee extra. So in order to avoid these kind of exchange fluctuations, they open an EEFC account. So through this EEFC account, the payment can be directly made in USD. That means if I have to make $1,000, then it can be directly made in US dollars. There is no need to convert it into INR, and there is no need to face any exchange loss, or exchange gain sometimes also comes, but it is a rare situation. So that is the reason EEFC account is opened, so that you can directly make the payment using USD or Euro without involving any exchange loss. Receipt of foreign inward remittance. This is nothing but your foreign inward remittance services. Whenever we receive any inward remittance, there is a certain form which we need to submit to the banks. So these are called as foreign inward remittance services. Okay, this commonly FIRC it is called. So we have to give a foreign inward remittance certificate to various authorities. So all these services are also provided by banks, and at the same time payment services to abroad. That means outward remittances. When we are making a direct advance payment, we can take use of this banking facility by making the outward remittance. So in this both type of inward and outward remittance, there is something which is commonly called as SWIFT. SWIFT is a message which is happened between the two bankers. That means if I have to make a payment from my SBI to a foreign bank of Standard Chartered Bank in America, then the messages between these two banks are conveyed through SWIFT. It is also called as SWIFT messages. So this SWIFT messages is mainly used for remittances, both inward remittances as well as outward remittances. It is just a dialogue. That means an exchange of communication between the two banks, because they do not communicate through mail, they do not communicate through WhatsApp and all those things. So the commonly used mode of communication between two banks when they have to make an international payment is called as SWIFT. Apart from this, we have something called as universal banking. Universal banking is the extended version of your previous MNC banking. So in this, what happens is, like, universal banking offers various facilities, like it offers all the three types of banking services. under one common roof. So what are those? It is called as wholesale banking, it is called as retail banking, it is called as investment banking. All the three services are provided together under one roof. The most common examples are your BNP Paribas, your Deutsche Bank, or Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan. These are all called as universal banks. Just like I mentioned, Citigroup, HSBC. Universal banks provide a lot of banking services. They provide wholesale banking also, they provide retail banking. That means we also can open an account with HSBC or with any other Citigroup. We also can open an investment banking account with all these banks, but in general BNP Paribas has only corporate accounts. We cannot open a savings account in BNP Paribas because it is mainly catered to meet the needs of the corporate sector. So that apart, but in case of HSBC or Citibank, we also can have an individual savings account. Some banks have different features depending upon their customer base. So universal banking offers all the services under one roof. It offers investment facilities, that means it offers FD facilities, it offers insurance facilities, it offers retail banking facilities under a common roof. That is the major advantage of internet banking. Basically, universal banking is like a one-stop shop where all financial products are available for customers, from core banking to asset management, wealth management, risk management, mutual funds, home loans, personal loans. Everything is offered under one-stop solution. So that is the main advantage of your universal banking. Previously, RBI has encouraged universal banking in India. However, after the 2008 market collapse, it restricted a lot of facilities. But again, now universal banking is getting quite popular. From Indian perspective, from Indian banks perspective, ICICI Bank and SBI are India centered but would be considered as universal bank because they have a branches outside India in a lot of places, and hence they can be considered as universal banks from Indian banks perspective. So now next comes to the important concept of this lesson, American Depository Receipt and Global Depository Receipt. So these are two important concepts which you should know. In general, what is American Depository Receipt? I'll just tell you the definition. It is a negotiable certificate issued by a US bank. This is the first important point. US bank, only banks can issue, and it is denominated in US dollar currency, and it represents securities of a foreign company. That means a non-US company. So that is the depository receipt. That means a bank, an American bank in America, will issue a receipt which represents the shares of a foreign company, and it is listed in the United States stock market. So these are one of the ways of investing in shares outside the country of where you reside. For example, apart from this ADR, GDR, there is something else which is also called as IDR. That means Indian Depository Receipt. So what happens in this case, I will just tell you. So companies in India, if they want to invest in shares of a foreign company, then they can use this facility called as Indian Depository Receipt. As of now, as far as I can recall, there is one Indian depository which is listed, and it belongs to Standard Chartered Bank. Standard Chartered Bank belongs to UK. So what happens is that the shares of Standard Chartered Bank are converted into a depository receipt, just like a normal receipt kind of thing, which represents the shares of the Standard Chartered Bank, and it is listed in the Indian stock exchanges, and institutions can buy it. Instead of directly buying shares, they can buy this Indian Depository Receipt. It offers the same benefits which you offer when buying a shares. That means you are eligible for getting a bonus share, you are eligible for getting a dividend. All the facilities are same, but instead of directly investing, some people do not have the facility to open an account in US and then invest in US shares. So what they can do is they can invest in Indian Depository Receipts, which represents the shares of your foreign company. Now this is something called as Indian Depository Receipt. Similarly, there is something called as American Depository Receipt. That means the US bank will issue this receipt, and this shares represents the shares of a foreign company. It can be of an Indian company, it can be of a Pakistani company, it can be of any any nationality company apart from a US company. As of now, if you see American Depository Receipts, few Indian companies are listed. For example, HDFC Bank, Dr. Reddy's, Infosys, ICICI, Wipro, TCS. All these shares are converted into depository receipt in America, and they are listed in the American stock exchanges. Only few major companies, which have large capitalization, that means which are very strong in their financial operation, as well as which are having a global presence, these kind of companies attract the investors. So from an Indian perspective, Indian company perspective, these are the companies which are listed in your American stock exchange in the form of American depository receipt. Now global depository receipt, global depository is just opposite to your American depository receipt. It can be issued by any global bank and it can be listed in any stock exchanges, and it represents the shares of a foreign country. For example, there are different stock exchanges like your Frankfurt Stock Exchange or Luxembourg Stock Exchange or London Stock Exchange. These are all the stock exchanges apart from your US stock exchanges. So when in these stock exchanges some shares of a foreign company are listed in the form of a depository receipt, it is called as global depository receipt. The only difference between ADR and GDR is that ADR can be listed only in the United States, whereas GDR can be listed apart from the United States stock exchanges. A lot of other stock exchanges which I have just mentioned now. So just for your benefit, the comparison chart is also mentioned here. If you can just look at it, you can understand it. So American depository, the main concept here is issued in. This is the most important thing because this is where the crux belongs to. Whereas ADR can be issued only in US, whereas GDR will be issued apart from US, that is your European capital market like London or Luxembourg, and this is listed only in American stock exchanges. This is listed in non-US stock exchanges. All of these depository receipts represents a share of a foreign company, So this is the meaning of your depository receipt. Next, coming to participatory notes. Participatory notes are also kind of an instrument which have a underlying asset. That means it is a piece of paper, but in that piece of paper some asset is mentioned. They are also used for making investments in stock markets. However, they are not used within the country. They are used outside India for making investments in shares listed in the Indian stock market. That is why they are called as offshore derivatives. This is the most important point. They are used outside India for making investment in shares listed in the Indian stock exchanges. They are generally issued by brokers and foreign institutional investors who are registered with SEBI. The investment is made on behalf of the foreign investors by the already registered brokers in India. For example, the Indian based brokerages buy India based securities and then they issue participatory notes to foreign investors. So what happens is that a broker in India, for example, a broker in India will buy shares of TCS. Okay, then TCS, he converts these shares into participatory notes. This participatory notes is purchased by foreign investors or the people who are outside India. They get all the benefits which they get by purchasing the shares. It is just like purchasing a shares, but instead of shares, the share value is represented in a note called as participatory note. In our earlier few slides, we have learned about depository receipt. So that also represents shares, but it is called as a receipt. Here it is called as a note. That is the only difference. But what makes it more important here is that in participatory notes, it is very difficult to identify who has invested in what shares. So that is the reason these participatory notes didn't gain much of an attention from the Indian government. So it is very simple investing. You can just go to a broker who is registered with SEBI and directly purchase the participatory notes. The advantage with participatory notes is anonymity. That means whomsoever entity is investing in this participatory notes is not required to register the SEBI, or they need not disclose their name. That's why it becomes difficult for the Indian government to find out who purchased it. Second is ease of trading. They need not open account with any of the SEBI listed brokerages. They can directly purchase the note from a already existing broker. Tax savings. Some savings benefits are also offered by the government. The only disadvantage is that it caused a lot of discomfort to the Indian authorities because there is no method of knowing who owns the underlying instrument. So that is the problem. So in this way, what happens is sometimes we do not know who owns it. So it becomes difficult for the government to control the total transaction of your participatory notes. So that is the only disadvantage with your participatory notes. Apart from that, most of the foreign entities try to either use your IDR or use your participatory notes. Whereas in IDR, it is only very restricted. That means as of now, the IDRs which are listed in our Indian stock exchanges is only belonging to SCB. I don't know if something new is added, but as far as I know, only Standard Chartered Bank IDR is listed in India. So apart from that, if you want to buy shares of any other company, then you have to follow the route of participatory notes. That means you have to approach an Indian broker and buy the participatory notes from that Indian broker. So that is the major difference between your participatory notes and your depository receipts. So in this chapter, only these two concepts are very important. The other things are very much normal, like your retail banking, wholesale banking, and your international banking. Okay, so this lesson is quite far so simple, nothing much to worry about this lesson. If you still have any doubts, you can just always ping me in my Telegram group. The link is given in the description below. Stay safe and have a nice day.